Hello and welcome back to the channel on our continuing voyage to become better blues players. My name's Mark, and in this video we're continuing our series on improvisation, and today's lesson is going to be about using a couple of very special licks that only apply to certain parts of the 12-bar blues chord progression because they have a very specific function. Now that probably sounds more complicated than it actually is. What I'm going to do is we're going to look specifically at bar 4 of a 12-bar blues chord progression and bars 12 and 8, because there are specific licks you can drop in there that have as I said, a particular function. This is carried on from the series. So in the last video we looked at dropping in licks into our improvisation, licks we'd already pre-learned. And the 3 licks I showed you were just kind of general blues licks, just revolving around the root note. So what we're going to do today is, instead of just having those general licks that you can just drop in at any point during the chord progression, I'm going to give you specific licks that you're going to drop in just certain places. Because actually, when you improvise, you might want to do that. You might want to just have certain things that you pull out at certain times, because there's parts of the 12-bar blues progression that you can do some interesting things with. So the way the lesson's going to work, I'm going to show you the 2 licks, then I'm going to improvise and I'll drop these 2 licks in these specific places. Then we'll come back on the other side and I'll show you a tab on screen and I'll show you the licks one by one, and then I'll leave you at the backing track so you can practice this for yourself. Okay, so the first one happens in bar 4. Now bar 4 of a 12-bar blues progression is really interesting because it's the last of the root chord before we then move to the 4 chord. So today we're in the key of G. So you'll notice that if you've been following the series, all the beginner kind of lessons were all in A, so that we just stayed in one place. For the intermediate series, which is what this is, I'm now trying to jump around keys a bit more to get you more used to jumping around the fretboard. So today we're in the key of G. So our first 4 bars of 12-bar blues are all G. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a special lick on bar 4. The lick's actually going to go like this. Here we go. It's going to go like this. Okay, now bar 4 is interesting. As I said, it's the last bar, so it's our last kind of bar of a block of 4 bars of G. And then what we want to do is we want to highlight to the listener, we're going to move chord now. We're going to change chord. We're not staying here, we're going somewhere else. And a great way that you can do that is to have a lick that highlights the flat 7th. So in this case, it's this note here, 3rd fret of the D string. So if you think of your your G minor pentatonic in this case, it's the one that's immediately below the root note. So there's your root note. So we're going to highlight this one here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to play this. Because what that's really doing is it's highlighting the notes from a G7 chord. So it's telling the listener, right, I'm really going to emphasize that flat 7 note to tell you that we're not staying here, we're going somewhere else. Okay, so that's the first one. And the second one then is bars 11 and 12. The last 2 bars of a 12-bar blues chord progression, you can throw in a turnaround. Now it's a lick that you can't use anywhere else in the chord progression. We can use it in just those last 2 bars, and it goes like this. Okay, and you'll instantly recognize that. You must have heard that like a million times. Loads of different blues players use that one, or variations on that type of thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to improvise, and I'm just going to make everything up as I go along, except when we get to bar 4, I'm going to throw in the first lick, and then when we get to bars 11 and 12, I'm going to throw in that little turnaround. Everything else is going to be improvised. Okay, so I'll kick the backing track on and see how we go. Then we'll come back on the other side and I'll teach you how to play those licks and give you a backing track as well. Okay, so again, just made up on the spot, hadn't practiced, I hadn't like worked anything out other than just those 2 licks. So in there, you'd have seen on bar 4, I played lick 1. But actually, I think the second time around, I played the same lick, but I played it up here in box position 2. Now you've seen we've done that quite a lot in this series. We've actually played a lick and played it here down in box 1 and then up here in box 2 as well. Because the fingerings are identical, it's just everything's an octave apart, so it's very easy to do that. Okay, and then as we got to the end of the chord progression, as we were turning around, I played that little cliched turnaround lick. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll teach you the actual licks. Lick 1, it goes like this. Nice and simple. We're starting 3rd fret of the G string and hammer on to 4. Then we're playing 5 on the D to 5 on the A, and then 3 on the D. And if you see a G7 chord on your fretboard, you should realise that what we're actually doing is we're kind of highlighting those notes. It's almost like going. That's kind of the voicing that we're making up by doing it. Okay, now a lot of comments that I get is that when I teach licks and stuff, I end on the root note. And in fact, on the beginner series of this, there was a lot of that where I was just saying, just focus on the root notes because you're always safe on the root notes. Root notes, nice place to land, to end a lick because it sounds nice and safe. Well, bar 4 is a place where actually ending on the flat 7 sounds really interesting, and it kind of tells your listener a little bit more sophisticated. Here, we're going to go somewhere else. Okay, so that's a lick you can use on bar 4. I'll show you the same one up here. Sorry, wrong key. Okay, so we're starting. Where are we? 6 on the top E string, hammer on to 7. 8 on the B string. 7 on the G to 6 on the B string. Okay, and it's kind of the same thing. It's exactly the same as what we played down here, just that it's an octave higher. Okay, then lick 2 now, which is the turnaround, which goes like this. Now, this one I taught in a turnarounds lesson with, I think it was like 11 different turnarounds. So if you followed that lesson, that was probably, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago maybe. If you actually done that lesson, you'd recognize this lick and you should already be able to play it. But I'll teach you it. The important thing is that it doesn't come in on beat 1. Often when I'm playing this, for beat 1, I'll just hit the root note. Because you want that descending run to start on beat 2. So I'll either leave beat 1 alone, not play anything, or I'll just stab a root note on beat 1. But basically this part then comes in on beat 2. And as I say, if you followed my turnarounds lesson, I kind of went through that in some detail. But basically, where are we? We're starting 7th fret, and I'm taking 2 fingers and I'm putting 1 on the G string and 1 on the top E string, 7th fret, and I'm basically going G string, top E string, back to the G string, and then move down a fret, and do the same thing again. So now we're at fret 6, G string, top E, G, and then down to the 5th fret, G string, top E, back to G. So nice and slow. Okay, now you've heard that played that slow as well before, I'm sure. As I say, real kind of cliche blues thing there. Then what I'm doing is I'm hitting 3rd fret of the G string and hammer on to 4. And then hitting the root note, which is 5th fret of the D string. So far we've got this 1. This is a D7 chord now I'm going for, but I'm kind of coming in from it from a note above, which is actually an E flat. Okay, so I'm aiming for my my D7 chord there, which is 5th fret of the A string, 4th fret of the D string, and then 5th fret of the G string. So I'm actually starting those just a fret above. So A string, D string, and G string is going to be 6, 5, 6 respectively. And then but just immediately coming down then to 5, 4, 5 on those strings. So you get this. I probably just described that in a whole way more that's more complex than it probably needed to be. It's just that shape, and you start a fret above and you come down into the D7. Okay, so those are my 2 licks. Now, why am I talking about teaching you 2 very specific licks in a course on improvisation? Because surely if we're planning to put these particular licks in this particular place, then it's no longer an improvisation, is it? Well, you're absolutely quite right. And the reason I'm doing it is it's an exercise to illustrate to you kind of like this technique. What I would do is I will have several licks that I can use in bar 4 that kind of emphasize that flat 7 note. I've got a bunch of them that I will just regularly call on. And I've got a bunch of turnarounds. As I said, there's actually a lesson I did of 11 of the most common ones I use. So in my mind, if you think back to our last lesson, we talked about turning up to a solo, kind of turning up with a big bag of licks already pre-prepared. Well, within there, I've got a bunch of licks that I can use that are very special to bar 4. And I've got a bunch of other licks which are very special to bars 11 and 12. And so the course of my improvisation, what I'm actually doing is when I know bar 4 is about to come up, I'm going to grab one of those specialist bar 4 licks and throw that one in. As I say, today I've just shown you one, but you can come up with others that emphasize that flat 7 note. And then when we get to the turnaround, I'm going to pull out one of my specialist turnaround licks. I mean, I could have gone for, you know, something different like, you know, something like that instead. And actually, I've got a whole bunch of those kind of, as I said, I've done a lesson of 11 of them. Whole different set of turnarounds. And what I'll do is just in the course of the improvisation, as we're coming up to bars 11 and 12, I'll grab one of those out and that's the one I slot in. So it is improvised. It's just that for the course of this lesson, I'm just only giving you one example for bar 4 and one example for bar 12. I'm sure if you look on YouTube, you'll find like millions of licks for, you know, turnarounds and different stuff. As I say, keep on saying, I did a whole lesson on that myself. Okay, so now it's your homework. First of all, please subscribe, please like to the video and all that kind of stuff. Please thank the Patreon supporters who've made this entire series possible because they suggested it in the first place. So thank you, Patreon supporters. Homework for this week is I will leave you with the backing track at the end of this video. The backing track is also available as a separate longer track on YouTube. Check the description below for details of that. The Patreon supporters get an MP3 of it as well as a way of thanking them. Also, there's tab available for this lesson. It's just for these 2 licks. It's not for the whole improvisation because the point is you don't learn the improvisation, you improvise. You're just learning these 2 licks so you can drop them in whenever you need them in those very specific places. Okay, so I'll leave you now with the backing track. Have a go with it, improvise around, but then be listening out for bar 4 to drop in lick 1, and listen out for bars 11 and 12 to drop in lick 2. Let me know how you get on. I realise this particular part of the series now we're getting a lot more advanced and a bit more technical and a bit more difficult. So I hope you're coping with that. I'll see you next time when I think we're going to be looking at adding the blue note in and looking at box position 3 as well. So until then, here's the backing track. Hope you get on well with it, and I'll see you next time.